Welcome to Success Talk. I'm Deborah Shariff. Thanks so much for streaming in. Today's guest is Irene Smalls. Irene Smalls is the award-winning author of 15 books for children published by Little Brown, Simon and Schuster, and Scholastic Press. She is a graduate of Cornell University with a degree in Black Studies and New York University with an MBA in Marketing and Behavioral Science. Born and raised in New York, Irene writes fond stories of her childhood in Harlem, her children, and African American history. Ladies and gentlemen, let me bring on the brilliant author, Miss Irene.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Deborah. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
I can. Yes, I hear you fine.
Wonderful,
You're
wonderful.
welcome. We are honored to have you on the
Thank
show.
you. Okay.
Yes. So I wanted to begin by your latest book because we're going to talk about the other books. But what I was so impressed with your latest book is because of so much misinformation with some of the educational institutions providing, more specifically to Black children, it deals with their low self esteem. And you want to get it in the beginning. And I think that might have
Yes.
been the reason for your latest book. So,
Most
mhm.
definitely, because what psychologists tell us is that self concept is formed between 0 and 3. And I grew up in Harlem in the 1950s under segregation. And in the 1950s in Harlem, it was a 98% Black community, and Black people loved each other. So we had a counter narrative that even though the rest of the society was saying Black people are inferior, Black people aren't smart, we had our narrative that said you are brilliant and you are beautiful. And it was from 0 till you went to elementary school. And so what I found is that whenever I go to schools and I'm talking about Black history, Black students put their heads down. There's such shame to the story of African American enslavement in this country. But I always tell them, we didn't do that. We did not enslave ourselves. And the idea that they associate this very, shall we say, long part of our history as totally negative is something that impacts them in terms of their ability to see themselves. And so Night Baby Night was again based on the research that from 0 to 3, if you can impact a child at an early age with a strong self concept, the rest of the world has a much more difficult time tearing them down, a much more difficult time lowering their self esteem. They've got a resiliency that's built in. And so Night Baby Night is all about that. It's about all these beautiful melanin master, topaz titan, all of these beautiful terms referring to Black boys in particular and Black babies.
Wow. And you can see the picture, the illustrations are absolutely beautiful. So, and also the audio. My goodness, where did you get that voice from? When people go on your website, but go on, Irene.
Yes, yes. No, Nathaniel Freeman is the actor out of LA who did the voiceover. And he was actually part of the LA actors group that went out to schools. So he had lots of reading books. So he had lots of experience reading children's books. And he volunteered to read Night Baby Night. And I said, sure, with a voice like that, how can I say no?
It was so active, and I wanted the viewers to actually check it out. But maybe another time when you come on, when you have another book. But I would love to let the viewers actually listen to that velvety, gorgeous voice as he explains "Night Baby Night." You have some other books, and I'm just going to let the viewers see exactly if I can get this to go. Let me
Mhm.
get it up here again. But these now, let me just stop right here for this particular book. I just love all of your books, and I was talking to my daughter earlier, and she mentioned she says, "Mommy, don't you remember when Irene had provided me with books when my kids were?" I said, "Oh my goodness, I forgot all about it." So you have been a champion for Black books, and more specifically as an author. But talk to us about these two books that I'm showing for for our audience.
Right, right. Well, the Christmas Masquerade is the story, a fictionalized story of the first Black Christmas that a lot of people talk about Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa was started in 1966 by Ron Karenga. And the reason Kwanzaa was started because it was believed that Black people did not have a Black Christmas tradition, but we did. The John Kankis was it's based on the African masquerade tradition, and it traveled from those slave ships, the bowels of that slave ship, and were was passed around the world wherever the Africans were taken. So they have John Canoe in the Caribbean. They have the John Kankis in South Carolina. They have the Gombe Festival. And Gombe is the box drum that you play as part of the John Kankis Festival. That wherever the Africans were taken, they have it in Puerto Rico. They have it in Belize, South America. And the thing is most interesting is that most Africans who were taken from the continent were not brought to the United States. They were taken to the Caribbean or to South America. And I actually went to Belize because I was assuming that the African masquerade tradition was an offshoot of the Africans who were brought there in enslavement, but it wasn't. It was from the African explorers that I have never seen any stories talking about Africans who went off in ships and sailed around the world, just the way the Europeans did with Columbus and Vasco da Gama and all of these European explorers that we learn about. But in Belize in particular, the tradition of John Canoe, the John Kankis, comes from these African explorers. And the idea is that to be literally on an ocean, to have a country that's on an ocean and nobody decides to get on a boat and go somewhere. And so it was just, amazing to me to find out that the Belizeans trace their African masquerade tradition celebrations to the African explorers. What happened is that for the most part, they were shipwrecked, but they were rescued by the natives, so on and so forth, intermarried, et cetera, et cetera. And there was this African cultural element introduced into South America before the slave trade. And so, in terms of knowing our history, those children had nothing to put their heads down about. And the other piece that I think is so amazing is that John Kankis was an actual man. He was an African chief who lived on the west coast of what is present day Ghana in Tres Punta Axum, and that he was a chief with an army of 1,000 warriors, and he kept the Europeans from taking his people for 20 years. He fought them off with those 1,000 African warriors. And so when people are talking about Kwanzaa, I always say Kwanzaa represents America reaching toward Africa, but the John Kankis is Africa reaching toward America. I mean, I could not imagine being on a ship for 6 months, with very limited, shall we say, eating and sanitary facilities, etc., and to get up and recreate my culture. But wherever the Africans were taken, they recreated African culture and passed it on to their children, the first African Americans.
Now, I never knew this. I absolutely never knew this, Irene, and we've been friends for a while. And
Yes.
and I remember you telling me on the radio show I had in Boston about it, and I almost like have amnesia because I forgot about this powerful story.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and but it's in a book. You have it in a book. There aren't any documentaries about this either.
No, there aren't. There's actually a fair amount of research. I mean, as the um, information that I found about John Connie, which is what the Europeans called him, was from the travel logs of European explorers who'd gone to Africa. And the earliest mention I found of John Connie was from 1720. And so obviously he was around before then. He was a king before then, but they talked about the festival and the ceremonies that they witnessed in John Connie's kingdom. That's literally the words that they used, and also the fact that he was much revered, and because he was such a fierce warrior, that Africans would say, John Connie to the Europeans to scare them because they knew that this fierce African was coming with those 1,000 warriors with the spears, okay? So they
Wow.
need to be careful. And, the irony of, I'm sure you've seen the Warrior King, the Warrior Queen.
I have not seen it yet.
Oh, it's
I know.
amazing.
I have not seen it.
It's an amazing story, but it's based on a lot of actual history. And what happened in Africa was you had the wars, so on and so forth, and literally the Europeans were kept out of certain parts of Africa because the tribes were too strong and they could fight. But what the Europeans did was they waited till the Africans fought each other, and they were so weak that no one tribe could repel a European invasion. And so the fights, the wars went on for, a long time. And so the tribes were so weak. And so the Europeans came in and took 10 million Africans from Africa. That's what's estimated in the slave trade. How many Africans were taken?
Oh, good. Now, if a parent or a caregiver or someone was to purchase this book, what would be in this book? Is it the story of John Kinkis, or
Well,
what would?
actually, there's a note in author's note in the front talking about the history, but it's a story about it's a Christmas story. And so, in the story, a young girl is sad because her parents have been sent away to play at a Christmas party on another plantation. And also interesting, there were very few plantations. Most Africans were enslaved on farms that held 10 slaves or less. And so this young girl is saying it's Christmas and so on and so forth. And literally in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where the John Kankers was centered in North America, they would have troops of up to 100 people, 100 Africans and African Americans, all dressed in rags and tatters, because under enslavement, they owned nothing. So they couldn't buy a hat or couldn't buy an instrument. And so they made cow horns and they had bells and they had sticks and they made their drums, that gumbe box drum out of an animal skin pulled over a log. And they would travel through the countryside singing their songs. And, to me, the added joy of the John Kankis was it was the first time you saw protest, African American protest against enslavement, because the songs that the Africans would sing in as they traveled, and they would travel to the various farms and plantations and homes, and they would sing funny stinging songs like "Poor Massa, so they say, down in the hills, so they say, got a mighty brush you." So they say. And so they were just, little songs, but it was all in jest. It was a party. We're dancing, but I'm saying some very nasty things about you and the way I'm being treated. So the John Kankis served a dual purpose. It was a one day of freedom that African Americans were given for the whole day. And it gave them an opportunity to get a little dig in
Mm,
about their condition of enslavement.
my goodness, if I was to produce a documentary, I have my advisor, my consultant, right here with you. This is an amazing story. And if, parents, if you're interested in telling your children stories of historic its significance, please get in touch with Irene. You can see at the bottom of the screen, Irene at littersize.com. And there's her phone number, 617-651-0821. So this is a fascinating story. I really never heard the whole story of this, Irene, and it is fascinating. Let's go to the next book that we have up here. It's
Oh,
Say
yes.
Eight. Talk to
Don't
me.
say ain't. I mean, my family was from Charleston, South Carolina. And believe it or not, I have a Southern accent. But as I went to school, I learned to, turn it on and turn it off. And so Don't Say Ain't is very much about Harlem in the 1950s. And Harlem as a Black community, a 98% Black community, there was no crime. People went to bed and left their doors wide open or left them, they closed them, but they never locked them because nobody ever stole anything. And so Don't Say Ain't is a story of that Harlem. Because on after school and on Saturdays, I'd get together with my girlfriends and we would play double dutch. And double dutch was sort of the athletic pursuit for girls who didn't have the money to go to camp or didn't have a second home to visit. And so we would get out on the streets and, don't say ain't or your mama will faint and your father will fall in a bucket of paint. And we danced to these rhymes as we were jumping the rope.
Oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. I'm looking on the stream because I know some folks might have some comments because we're live streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn,
Okay.
and Twitter. That is amazing. Let's get to the next book. And then I want to talk about some of your services that you also offer. So let's get to the next series. And there we have Jenny Reen. What is
Right,
the
right.
book?
What I, thought about and what I've been doing is that writing a 12-month Black History series. That one of the things that I've, you know, noticed is that, Black history gets talked about heavily during February. And then not so much the other months of the year, but African Americans worked solidly 12 months a year. And African Americans as a people they had full lives, they were full people, and to marginalize them to 1 month of the year. And so what I did was I started reading Black slave narratives, going back and reading the actual slave narratives. I wasn't reading the stories written by someone who read the narratives. I went back and read the narratives myself. And because my family came from Charleston, South Carolina, and I basically have a Southern accent, I I could understand. It was a thicker accent than what I grew up with, because it's from, again, these were former enslaved African Americans, but I could understand it. And so I found these really rich stories of the Jack Lantern, who's a creature who'll get you, if you don't watch out. And he was so African American parents could keep their children safe because any Black child that was found alone would be taken. If there was somebody on a wagon or a horse moving, they just take the child. There were no laws that protected Black children. And so parents would say, "Oh, there's a terrible creature out there with the googly goggly eyes," and oh, etc. And be like, "Oh no, I'm not going away," etc. But it was the only way they had to protect their children.
Hmm.
And so, if for me, the Jack Lantern was a natural October story, and then there was the John Kinkus, which is December, and of course there's Thanksgiving. And African American had corn shucking festivals, and it was at the end of the harvest. And the corn shucking festival was particularly wonderful because African Americans could invite other African American, enslaved African Americans to come and join the festival. And the bottom line was you worked all day, then you worked all night. So the owners were totally pleased, but the opportunity to be together, to talk to who you wanted to talk to see family members that you didn't get a chance to see every day, and also was at the end of the harvest, so there was a feast. So there was this quality of life and this Black joy that was maintained, by fully dimensional people throughout enslavement. And so, in writing the 12 months of Black history, I wanted to tell those stories that, Black history is fine. And again, a lot of people think Black history was chosen because it was the shortest month, but actually it was chosen because it was a day in Black history after the Civil War that had meaning. And so the concept of embracing all of our fullness, because again, people want to pretend that we had dire, miserable lives. And we're going to just, we worked and then we, died. And that was all there was to it. But these people had babies and they had loves and they had joy in their lives despite all of the things that they had to deal with.
These stories are fascinating, absolutely fascinating. If you want to get a hold of Irene, here it is at the bottom of the screen, Irene@litersize.com. Her phone number is 617-651-0821. And my next favorite one, this is the one I think you were on a bus. Both of us were on a bus back in the day. This was
Mm-hmm.
a while ago. And I think I mentioned to you that one of my favorites was Jonathan and his mommy.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, Jonathan and his mommy has a long story, I tell you, because Jonathan was a busy little boy. He's now 39. I keep saying, how can he be 39? I'm not 39. No, I'm not. Not at all. And um, Jonathan was a busy boy. I'd be chasing him all over the park. Jonathan, Jonathan, oh, please come here. Jonathan, oh. And then I remembered kindergarten. And again, I went to segregated schools with black teachers. And I went into kindergarten. I told my teacher I was smart enough already. I told her I didn't need to learn how to read. And I didn't want to learn how to write because at 5 years old, I knew everything there was to know. And she said, yes, you are very smart. And she said, we play games. So I was like, what? I like games. I really like games. And she says, and then after games, we have snack. I was like, snacks, that's my favorite thing. Oh my goodness, can I have some snack now? And she said, first, let's do this. And she opened up a book and she read Little Brown Baby with the Sparkling Eyes, who's daddy's partner and mama's joy. Little brown baby with the sparkling eyes. And at 5, I was called the little brown baby girl. And I thought about it. And I'd only been in kindergarten one day, and they had already written a book about me. So I decided I was going to stay in kindergarten for a little while, play some games. My kindergarten teacher never said no. She never said don't. She never said stop. She had 25 5-year-olds all by herself. And what she always said was, let's play a game. And we were like, oh yeah, we want to play a game. We want to play a game. And she had us ripping and roaring. I mean, we had a little hat for spelling, and then we had a dance step for math, and we had, so many activities, and we didn't realize we were learning. We thought we were playing a game. So she was a brilliant Miss Loretta Abbott. And I found out later, she choreographed the entire kindergarten curriculum. And I
Mm.
thought everybody dances through kindergarten, right? And I found out later she was one of the original Alvin Ailey dancers.
Oh my God.
And
This,
she couldn't get work as a dancer, so she got her teacher's license. And she was in the schools with all these busy 5-year-olds bouncing up and down. And she said, oh, I know what to do with that. And we were bouncing around and learning so
Mm.
much. I love her dearly. I'll never forget her.
Wow, that is so beautiful. So is that how Jonathan and his
That's
mother
exactly
came
how
about?
Jonathan, because I couldn't catch up with Jonathan. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got it. Jonathan, let's play a game. And
Yeah.
so Jonathan, his mommy, is the game, the walking game. So I could catch up with Jonathan, that we would play in Titus Sparrow Park that, involved the zigzag steps and the bunny steps and the itsy bitsy baby steps and the long giant steps and all of that. But the bottom line was, at the end of each set of steps, Jonathan stopped and I could catch up with him. So my kindergarten teacher taught me many, many lessons.
Oh, that is beautiful. These stories are unbelievable. I'm going to turn to the next one, and so that you can comment, and hopefully this will, there it
Oh,
is.
yes, yes. My Nana and Me is really, as I said, I don't make stuff up. I wish I could, but I write about, I always tell children I write stories from the tip of my nose. I write stories about the things I see every day, the people in my life, the people I love. And My Nana and Me is about my godmother, who really raised me and was so pivotal in my in everything that I've done, everything I do. And she'd always said, child, you don't never have nothing. You always got you. And I said, oh, okay. I guess I can do that. I got me, etc. And just the kind of sayings that, she always say, girl, you're going too far to fall back. I say, oh, man, I can't do this. I can't do that. She says, girl, you're going too far to fall back. And I say, okay, Nana. Okay, Nana, I'll do it. I'll do it. And so we would play games. And she had a second grade education. And so she didn't know how to read, but she was the smartest woman I've ever met in my life. And as I
Mhm.
said, the lessons, the Ivy League degree goes out the window, and then the master's is gone. But what's left is what my Nana taught me.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is
Yes.
beautiful. Gosh, we need 2 hours for you, Irene.
Oh, oh,
Look,
thank you, Deborah.
you kidding? You're
Well,
welcome.
Kevin and his dad is a story I adopted. My sister died, and she had a young son, and Kevin. And so, again, in the African American community growing up, there were, it was before welfare, before, social services and stuff like that. And babies were just passed around from family to family, neighbor to neighbor until the baby stuck somewhere. And so, in that tradition, I was not about to let my nephew go into foster care. So I said, get in the car. After his mother's funeral, he's looking at me. I'm a 7-year-old. He's seen me a couple of times, but he doesn't know me that well, and literally he had nothing. Didn't have a toothbrush, didn't have a stick of clothes, didn't have anything. I just said, get in the car. And so I kind of sized me up. He didn't get in the car right away. He's looking at me. Is she going to eat me? Is she going to beat me? I don't know about this woman. But he got in the car and, moved to Boston and went to, Boston schools, graduated from a Massachusetts college, and now he's working in television production in New York.
Wow.
So Kevin is dad. And the one thing that I always remember was that even though his mother had died, his father was still alive.
Uh-huh.
And I had to go to his father to say, I'm going to take your child.
Mhm.
And I was so moved because his father really loved him. Kevin was his only son. And I'm going to this man saying, I'm taking the core of your life. I'm taking the love of your life. And I could see the struggle in his face, in his body, and how he so loved his son that he gave him to me.
Mm.
And he said years later, the reason he did that was because he could see his son graduated from college with me. Because I tend to be a reader and make sure people get their homework done and do all this other stuff. And surely enough, Kevin graduated with a 4-year college degree. But as I said,
Mm.
it touched me so hard because he was so, so hurt and in so much pain, to give up the one thing at this point, his wife was gone and he had this boy. And to give the boy to me, we didn't know that well, frankly. I've seen him a couple of times. That was it. Um, but to have the faith that I would do the right thing, that I would take good care of his child. And as I said, he gave me his son.
That's a beautiful story, Irene. I've heard that story from you before, and every time I hear it, it just has chills because basic media is that black men don't care about their sons or their children, and that's so much to the opposite
Oh,
when you
yes.
think about your particular story, and some of the stories that I know growing up. So,
Mhm.
what a beautiful story, beautiful. Let me get quickly there. I think the last one here. I believe it might be night. It might. Oh no, that's Pop Pop.
Pop
Yeah.
pop. Oh yes, yes. Well, as I said, growing up in the 50s in Harlem, black
Oh,
men were very versatile. And Pop Pop and me is about my great uncle Clarence. And my great uncle Clarence was a he was a cook, he was a babysitter, he was a all around, black man. And I remember that I was so little. He used to take me to the movies. The movies were 25 cents. Every Saturday, he would take me to the movies, and I was so
oh,
little that I
mhm.
couldn't see his face. And I remember just these great big feet and these great big long legs, and somebody holding my hand. And that was my great uncle Clarence.
Wow.
And I just have so many fond memories of him. And that's why I really wanted to book about, my pop about his, as I said, he would cook and he would cuss and he would drink and he would chase women, but he was diapering and, chastising and, opening up, books. He couldn't read that well. Again, my family came with the Great Migration to Harlem, but he
Hmm.
knew he wanted you to read. And so, I mean, all of the kinds of things that these people poured into me. And I think that it's such a disservice not to give the full credit to the African Americans. I learned more about Black history from August Wilson than I learned from all the books I've ever read. I mean, it's like America deals with African American history as there was enslavement and then there was civil rights. But there was
Hmm.
a whole lot of living, a whole lot of striving. The African Americans, you know, evidenced and did that took place. And, I think about, as I said, my godmother who scrubbed floors from a living. And on Saturday mornings, all the grandmothers in my neighborhood got down on their knees and scrubbed the sidewalks in Harlem. And so the front hallways, the vestibule, the whole thing, because they cleaned for a living and they were going to be clean and their babies were going to have clean places. There
Right.
was no bottle caps, no, wrappers, nothing on the street. And this was before heroin hit Harlem, before drugs.
Mm.
And it's amazing the impact that drugs had on Harlem and Black people, that all of a sudden there were locked doors. All of a
Mm.
sudden people were afraid. And before then, it was just this Southern Black community that just happened to be in the North.
Irene, you should have a podcast and just tell these stories.
Mm,
This is absolutely amazing. I am just riveted. And you see the picture on top.
yes.
Tell us about that picture. I love, love, love that picture. I've seen it before, but I wanted to share it on this show.
Oh, well, thank you. Actually, it was what was it? I saw in a street vendor, and she had these beautiful, beautiful African necklaces and, earrings and so on and so forth. And I was like, wow, and I actually purchased, they were, reasonably priced and all handmade.
Mhm.
And so, as I am, shall we say, maturing,
Oh, I'm
and
sorry. But you're talking about the picture with,
oh,
I
was
was
it?
talking about the
Oh, I
other
thought you.
picture
Okay,
with
I
the.
thought you were talking about the jewelry picture. Okay,
Oh,
fine, fine.
I'm
No,
sorry.
this was part of an American Express promotion that I did, and it was a library setting, and I was talking to kids about books and about writing, and American Express was kind enough to come and film it and put it in one of their small business magazines.
Oh,
So this was a an opportunity to share some of the books that I've written and to talk with kids,
wow.
about the importance of reading.
Wow. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of getting, there it is. I wanted to get a big picture of that. Look at that smile. Look at the children. They just look like they're so interested in whatever it is that you're saying. And of course, we already talked about night night babies. So,
Yes, yes.
um,
Let me say one thing is that 0 to 3, the self concept is formed, largely formed, but also good night baby books are recommended by the American Association of Pediatricians as part of a pre calming bedtime ritual. Because what it also does is it teaches pre reading skills, early literacy skills. It
mhm.
teaches babies that books go from left to right. You start at the top of the page and you go to the bottom of the page. And it connects the symbols, and understand, to a baby, letters and words are symbols with sound. And so they see that, oh, that symbol has a sound. Okay, and so again, you're putting it in 0 to 3 to 4. So the research studies show that when those children who are read to as part of bedtime rituals, they have a greater chance of success in school because they come ready to learn. And when we talk about the academic achievement gap, I mean, one of the things that frustrates me is that some things, I mean, there are lots of issues in this country, racial, otherwise, that are hard, that are very difficult and very expensive to solve. But there's some things that we can work on that are fairly inexpensive. That I raised 3 children, and no one ever told me about having a bedtime routine, about a bedtime ritual, about the amount of sleep that a 6-month-old baby needs versus a 1-year-old baby needs, so on and so forth. And again, the amount of sleep, a child or an infant having a proper amount of sleep impacts their emotional resiliency, their health, their growth and development, and their academic success. So something as simple as saying your baby needs 10 hours of sleep a night, and telling parents that early on will enable them to figure it out, make it happen, and also to give their child this very simple, inexpensive head start and preparation for school.
Wow. And if any viewers are interested in checking out the newest book by Irene Smalls, it's HTP, it's on the bottom of the ticker, HTTPS semicolon forward slash forward slash www.nightbabynight.com slash share. And you can see it at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to get a hold of Irene, I know you all can read, but it's Irene at literasize.com. Her phone number is 617-651-0821. Irene, I'm just riveted. Telling story, I love stories. And your
Ah,
stories have so much history behind them.
well,
And
thank you very much. I
yeah,
appreciate it. I just want to say one thing is at the last page of Night Baby Night,
mhm.
you see the baby in the sleep, and it has "I love you, black child"
Oh,
on the nightie, the onesie, and I see Night Baby Night is really universal because it's for all the children of the rainbow. Because at night, each baby is the ebony baby. And
yes.
in the dark, you don't know what color the baby is. And research shows that babies notice race at 6 months, but they don't know. It has no meaning to them. It's just looking. There's orange, there's yellow, there's brown, there's all of these colors, and they notice it. They're like, oh, okay, what else? Kind of thing. And so the idea of being able to teach children that there's a universality to life, to value, is something that you can begin to teach again, 0 to 3 and on up as children progress into society.
Wow. That is so, and you actually offer workshops. Can you talk just
Yes,
briefly? We're almost at the
I
end of the stream,
do.
but talk
Yeah.
about the workshops that you offer.
Well, as an author, I certainly offer author visits, Black History Month programs, but I also offer workshops on sleep and diversity. I call it the Sleep, the Minority Report, that talk about the inequities in terms of sleep in this society. I also deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. And so having a range of services is, I think, important and part of the real mission of the book. It's about expanding the message beyond the pages of the book.
Awesome. And again, if you have just tuned in and you're saying, "Oh my goodness, I want to see this whole, uh, uh, I want to see this whole stream in its entirety." If you do, go to YouTube, Deborah Sharif. Let me just throw that up there so you can see it. Success Talk with Deb Sharif at gmail.com. You can email me. Also, you can go on YouTube and look for Deborah Sharif Success Talk, and you should find it there. Irene, do you have any parting words as we close out?
Well, I think that the most important thing is I'd like to thank you as this wonderful, excellent host for inviting me on your program. And I'd like to share with the viewers how during the holiday season, how important it is to give gifts of the future. And to me, books are a gift of the future. That my grandmother always told me there's a capital good and a consumer good. A capital good will make money for you, a consumer good, you use it and it loses value. So books are a capital good and it's a gift that keeps on giving.
Oh my goodness, these gems are precious. Thank you so much, Irene, for being a good colleague and author and sharing with us those precious stories. Thank you so much.
Okay,
And I
it's been
want
my pleasure.
to, and I want to thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. Until next time, Success Talk with Deborah Sharif. Thanks for streaming in. Take care.
Bye.